Thank you very much for waiting for such a long time. Yesterday and today, in the last 2 days, so you have joined us, and we thank you all very much. We would now like to start the high-level roundtable closing session of those 2 days programs. I am Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary, and I am being involved in the preparatory team leader as well. I'm Kazunobu Kato. Thank you very much for your kind support and understanding. Well, on behalf of all the participants, we'd like to introduce the former president of Latvia, Mr. Freiberger, as well as the vice president of the National Assembly of Vietnam, and Mr. Gan as well.
Yes, please.
The floor is mine? Yes. The floor is mine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's been 2 very exciting days, and they're not quite over yet. And I join all those who thank Prime Minister Abe for the broad initiative he has undertaken to make of his country a leader in an area where, as things stand now, it still has a way to go. And he has expressed the high goals and ideals of his government, which is to achieve gender equality, which could match any time the best that has been done anywhere in the world, including Northern Europe and Scandinavia, as at the moment examples where social justice is indeed more advanced, as in many another country which is equally or much more prosperous than these countries are. We have been hearing here a litany of all the ills that female flesh is heir to and all the social injustices that women have been subjected to. But this is just part of what ails humanity. If we look around us, we see social inequality, we see social injustice, we see brutality of the strong against the weak. We see the ideologies and fanaticisms of some endangering the lives, the cities and places of residence of millions of people who are displaced and become refugees. I grew up as a child of refugees after the Second World War, and sadly, the world has little progress since that time. We continue to see floods of refugees, among whom women and children obviously suffer the most. My little sister died 1 month after we left our country as refugees, but refugees continue to perish. They drown in the Mediterranean, they drown in China Sea, they drown many places. There's a lot to be done in the world, and it takes commitment to do it. And as Prime Minister Abe pointed out, a top-down approach by governments is one important step and a fundamental step to be taken. If legislation is in place that, first of all, ensures the right to life and liberty, the right of assembly, the right of free speech, the right of expression and of opinion and of religious freedom, then we have the basis for a society that is worth living in and where people can look forward to the future with some degree of hope and feel that their efforts and their contribution will make it even better than the society they inherited from their parents. If this is not in place, then the population and the leaders have a lot to do to ensure that it happens. But top-down is just one aspect. It has to be also from the bottom up. And from the bottom up means societal mores, it means the values that are held by people, it means overcoming stereotypes that discriminate against some people and choose them as targets of violence, of hatred, of injustice, and of just plain stupid behavior on the part of their fellow citizens. As far as prejudices are concerned, we must remember that it is not a question of men against women, but of humanity against inhumanity, as in every other aspect of human life. Women can be as prejudiced towards other women as any man can ever be. Prejudices are born and bred in the family. The family has to be the place where mothers do not impose old stereotypes on their daughters, but on the contrary, I have seen cases where a grandmother would encourage her granddaughters to get an education because her daughter didn't manage it, she didn't manage it, but she wants at least her granddaughters to have it. I think you all sitting here are part of that great movement across the world where you are committed to participating in change for the better, and where you are committed to doing something to achieve it, even be it small steps. And I would like very much to encourage every single one of you to remember the goals that you hold must be extremely high. Your ideals must remain oriented towards the stars and towards what can possibly be done in the best possible of worlds. But if you find the world around you very far from ideal, you must not get discouraged. You must not give up hope that things can change for the better. Whatever situation, it can change, it must change, and you human beings and you participants in your generation, you are the ones who can participate in it. In other words, the empowerment of women is just part of the empowerment of human beings, period. And the first step towards achieving it is for women as well as men to understand our common humanity. If we are not conscious of our common humanity, we cannot have respect for others. But most of all, if we are not conscious of that commonality of spirit between men and women everywhere, we cannot possibly have the proper sense of empowerment and of belief in ourselves and in our own worth and value if we do not respect that we see in others. So it is a process of mutual growth that we have to work towards. Let us start by respecting and helping our neighbor, whatever their sex, whatever their color, wherever they come from. Let us start by believing in ourselves and in our potential, and then we will be able to see the potential in others, to nurture it, to help it grow, and one step at a time. Not necessarily by great big leaps forward, although these too can be achieved at times, but step by step, if we can be convinced that we must move forward, that we can move forward, and yes, starting today and tomorrow, I will be part of that process, then we can look forward to a world where our sons and our daughters will grow up, all of them, feeling equally empowered as human beings of worth and value, and we can all hope to create a planet that will survive in spite of the frequent stupidity of the human race that inhabits it. I wish us all good fortune, strength, perseverance, and good luck in what we have to do. It's been a pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you very much. And now we would like to go on to hear from Ms. Gan, Vice President of the National Assembly of Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, representing the delegation of the parliamentarians from the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, I would like to greet the participants, especially Prime Minister Abe, and I would also want to express feelings of affections of the Vietnam people to the people of Japan and the world. I would also like to extend my deepest gratitude to Prime Minister Abe for holding this symposium. The World Assembly for Women in Tokyo 2015 is an important event which indicates the Japanese government's interest to promote women's empowerment in Japan and the world. Empowerment of women, that is, a society where women can shine, is what is discussed by the participants. It is also an opportunity to make proposals and to search for new ways to solve issues. Following on 2014, this year's WAW 2015, I am certain, will bring about fruitful results for the activities of the women in the world. If you think about it, a society where women shine is where we recognize that women play an important role in the solving of issues faced by society. Put another way, it means the realization of a society where men and women are equally respected. Women's knowledge and capabilities in any country will promote environmental protection, political stability, and the development of society and economy, and contribute to labor efficiency. In the development of mankind, women must play a central role. The Millennium Development Goals were adopted by the United Nations, and each country has worked for enhancing gender equality and the raising of the status of women. And the results towards gender equality have, on a global scale, changed the lives of women and girls. Vietnam in recent years has made efforts to secure gender equality and the participation of women in politics and society. We have a national strategy for 2011 to 2020 and have actively developed gender equality, that is to gradually eliminate gender gaps in politics, economy, labor, and work, and also for the enhancing of the quality of female labor, for welfare, culture, and information provision, for the securing of gender equality in family life, and to eliminate the violence and sexual violence. So the government has set policies which incorporate the women empowerment and gender equality, and we are trying to reinforce the supervision of the various laws. Furthermore, in order to secure gender equality with the objective of learning and exchange of views, we are reinforcing international cooperation in bilateral and multilateral manner. And in March in Hanoi, the 103rd International Parliamentarians Union meeting was held, and at this meeting, this was also a theme that gathered much interest because at the time we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the meeting of women parliamentarians. And this year is also 20 years after the Platform for Action was adopted at the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. And so the efforts made by Vietnam have been highly evaluated by the international community, and at the same time, there was a declaration for action to promote women's empowerment, which was adopted at the conference, which made a big impression on the international community. Vietnam, in the past, has raised the percent of female workers to 48%, and also the level of female literacy to over 90%. It has also worked to enhance the quality of medical care for pregnant women, also to protect women from spousal violence. If I may speak as a leader and administrator of a country, I would say that the percentage of women working for the Vietnamese state agencies have maintained a relatively high level. 2015 it's when we review the attainment of the Millennium Development Goals and move to the next step, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. So therefore, this is a very important year. Sustainable development is synonymous to build a society which is fair and equal, and therefore the gender equality is not just about attaining the Millennium Goals. It should be incorporated into all the goals of the sustainable development. The setting of the Sustainable Development Goals and their realization is necessary, and policy makers should not overlook the rights and potential of women who make up half the world's population. The issues of environmental destruction, depletion of resources, and the expanding disparities are such that have to be taken up by both men and women. So in that sense, I highly evaluate the theme of this symposium that the Japanese government has provided for us this time in the form of a forum of discussion. And the views of the participants of this symposium will be very useful in coming up with recommendations and proposals to promote women's empowerment in each country. I believe that it will also create international networking and movement which will promote the role of women. I am very happy for the success of this symposium, and I pray for the health and happiness of all of the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have heard the representations from the representatives of all the delegates. This morning and this afternoon, we had a small group discussions. So we'd like to hear the reports from each group. So time is so limited, so each group has 5 minutes to present their result of the discussion. The first group is a subgroup E1 entitled Work-Life Management. And the speaker is Ms. Rosalind Hudnell.
Thank you. I had the honor of working with a brilliant group of leaders that was wonderfully moderated by Akiko Nakajo from Google. And we looked at work-life effectiveness, work-life balance as how can we ensure that workers, women and men, can create healthy families and healthy careers to drive productivity and growth here in Japan. And we looked at it as a culture change through shared responsibility of government, business, and the community. And we came up with 5 areas that we would suggest that we think deeper about over the course of the next year before we all get back together. The first one was we believe that we need to do a thorough review of the existing legislative framework. We believe we should be looking at it to identify both barriers and opportunities that we might not be utilizing as much as we should. The areas we believe should be reviewed is length of the workday, how part-time work is impacting, particularly women, flexible work contracts, how overtime is categorized, and work limitations of all of that. We also believe that we should be looking at the existing infrastructure of laws and regulation around parental leave and identify opportunities to encourage particularly men to use it and potentially reward those that do. The second thing we talked a lot about was the need to encourage flexibility, but we also saw an opportunity to improve productivity in the process by better use of technology here in this country. The group felt that beyond building awareness, there was an opportunity potentially to create a Ministry of Information Technology, to promote the understanding of the use of technology in business, to provide incentives for adoption, and again, to look at the legislative framework that governs technology in the country. Many of the best practices from companies in the room dealt with the use of technology to encourage flexibility and also to improve productivity in the workday. The third area that we believe we should really look at is how we can collectively come together to not only review, but actually build and increase the capacity for both child and elder care, to create a licensure process for both community-based organizations and also an opportunity to leverage and in fact encourage adults, many of whom have finished raising their own families, to potentially go into their own businesses to help provide more capacity in this country. We felt there might be opportunities to explore tax incentives, and that could also create an increased focus on entrepreneurship, which goes into the fourth area that we discussed, that we believe that creating innovation and economic growth in this country will be well enabled by creating a stronger focus on entrepreneurship for both women and men. But that is going to take a focused shared responsibility and effort looking at financing, government incentives, and business mentors for others to follow. We also felt that there are wonderful good ideas that currently exist. And so our fifth area of focus is really in identifying, promoting, and in fact marketing the good ideas that are working in businesses and in countries. That we should create potentially some healthy competition for businesses to adopt new ideas, for them to look at how they can promote and in fact compete for great talent by adopting new ideas, but it should not be kept secret. We also believe there are ways to use, whether it be some social interaction online, maybe have additional workshop, that there's really an opportunity that the government can not only identify, but can document great work that's happening. There were two areas the committee wanted me to mention that we just ran out of time to come up with specifics, but we feel that it's important. We could not totally agree on how far government legislation should go, particularly related to incentives and oversight of the workday. But again, we do feel that should be looked at. And the other emergent area that we felt when it came to culture change was that we really needed to look at how we were acculturating young boys and girls as it relates to a value for building lives that look at work-life effectiveness and shared responsibility for not only careers, but family care. So those were our areas, and I hope I have done justice to the phenomenal discussion that went on today. We could certainly go longer than 5 minutes, and we probably needed 5 more hours, but we felt that these were the places that we could be specific enough and hopefully provide value to the next level of conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your compact report from your group.
Next is E2, Engaging Men in Reforms. That's the theme for E2. Ms. Diane Fukami is going to give us the summary.
Many of our suggestions are very similar to E1, and so there will be a little bit of overlap. We basically divided our discussion, very lively, robust discussion, into 3 categories or 3 themes: workplace, government, and culture. So I'll begin with workplace. We also recommend promotion and creation of more flexibility with both job schedule and workplace jobs. We also encourage more flexibility with parental leave, making sure that there is more time for paternity leave, and also encouraging the use of paternity leave as well. We want to promote mentoring men in the workplace around equality issues. Piggybacking off of E1's recommendation on improving ICT to encourage more productivity, we also encourage that, as well as more emphasis on teleworking so that it will increase productivity and also add to more home life time. We would also encourage changing the work culture so that people will embrace and celebrate diversity and family, especially when there are announcements at work about pregnancy. In terms of government, we believe that there needs to be a firm commitment and funding from global leaders around the world to really begin a serious discussion on gender equality. There should be a creation of goals, metrics, and an action plan. Just as Japan, Sweden, and Rwanda have made gender equality a priority, we believe that other countries should do so as well. We believe that managers should make a commitment to take 100% of the parental leave. In many countries, parental leave and especially paternity leave is available, but we understand that's not always used. We also believe that there should be a creation between business and government about collaboration. On a local level, in terms of government and municipalities, there should be ongoing organizations and WAW affiliated events, such as discussion groups. Moving now to culture, we also believe that education of gender equality should start at the primary level, optimally at age 5. An example of that would be books in kindergarten or first grade that defy traditional stereotypes. Dads who stay at home taking care of children, moms who are scientists, for example. We believe that there should be and encourage a support system between women to create a new kind of sisterhood, to eliminate competition between women because of lack of resources, and that women should be able to help each other and promote and encourage each other at the workplace. Australia has had an interesting program that works called Champions of Change, in which they recruit male influencers in all areas of industry. So that would be in the sports industry, in business, in government. And what they've done is they've asked these men to commit to tangible change to help gender equality. That would mean creating goals and targets, and also something called a panel pledge, which we felt was quite novel and very effective and also free. So in other words, when men are often asked to participate on a panel, in this situation, they say, and how many women are also going to be on that panel? And if there's not an equal amount of women, then they decline unless the number of women on the panel also increases. Now, this is something that it's a little novel and unique here in this country, but we believe that men should be included and encouraged to be in the delivery rooms at the hospital when your babies are born. This would promote immediate engagement and involvement with the children. Among women, they should create organizations to help promote female leadership and organizations and encourage collaborative learning and education among men. So for instance, to set progress areas and to work together. An example, for instance, is that in Australia, and I'm using Australia a lot because they were quite vocal and were very forward-thinking in some of their suggestions, the group of influencers there decided that on their own stock exchange, they would make a new regulation which included gender information for C-level officers that would now be public. Create gender equality as a marketing product. Make it cool, make it fun, make it hip so that everybody wants to be a part of that. Also use the power of consumerism. That means patronize or boycott vendors, suppliers, and companies that do not commit to gender equality. And the last thing is to convene male champions, both international and national, on a regular basis to exchange and share ideas. Perhaps an idea for next year's 2016 WOW. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kami. Next, we would like to go on to E3, and Danielle Banquier will be reporting on women facing challenges. Ms. Banquier.
Thank you. Our workshop discussed a slightly difficult subject, single mothers and motherhood discrimination. And our participants came from governments, from Denmark, from Japan, from Vietnam, and from the EU. But we also had representatives of private companies, we had representatives from civil society and academia. The biggest problem that single mothers face is the difficulty to reconcile their professional obligations with their family obligations. And many single mothers and single mother households are at risk of poverty. In Japan, it's half of the households headed by a single mother that are at risk of poverty. In the EU, it's a third. So what to do and how to help and support single mothers? We came up with 5 areas for actions to be undertaken by various actors. First of all, we came to the conclusion that it's of key importance to allow single mothers to continue to participate in the labor market and to work full-time and in a job that corresponds the skills and competence of the women concerned. Secondly, we thought that the welfare systems have a role to play, an important role to play, to provide income that enables and activates single mothers, and also welfare systems have a role to play to provide child benefits that are sufficient. Thirdly, we thought that particularly for single mothers, it's important to have childcare infrastructure, to have kindergartens, to have after-school care in order not to transfer the difficulties of the mother to the second generation and to the children. And here, of course, governments have a role to play, but also companies. And we had a representative of a company, of a laundry company here in Japan that provides childcare for its employees, and it's actually also in the interest of this company, because this is a way for the company to recruit skilled employees. Fourth, the Prime Minister Abe, who joined our workshop for a part of the workshop, underlined the importance to provide one-stop help and support centers for single mothers. And finally, we thought it was very important to address the stigma and the prejudice that is often still attached to single motherhood. First of all, here, what is very important is legislation, effective legislation that is also effectively enforced. And secondly, the workshop came to the conclusion that it's very important to discuss the issues faced by single mothers, to break the silence, and also to promote role models of single mothers who have made it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now the next speaker, representing a small group, G1. About the girl and education, and Ambassador Shiraishi will be the speaker.
Welcome participants to set the earphone, since I am requested to speak in Japanese. Okay, set the earphone.
Thank you very much. I'm Ambassador Shiraishi, and I was participating in the workshop entitled Girls and Education. At the workshop, we focused on two themes. That's our proposal. The first theme is that for all the girls and women should have the access to the primary and the secondary education to be completed, which is free and then accessible. And the second point, that for all the girls and women, the higher education, including university opportunity, should be given, and it should be also high quality. So what should we do to secure such an access to higher education, especially to major in science and technology, or professional vocational training access? And so the women students' participation in such vocational and professional training should be also considered. So those are two focal points. As the lead speaker, we have a person from the Cote d'Ivoire and Sri Lanka and Maldives. And United Nations has a Millennium Development Goals, And as a result of that MDG, that in each country, the primary education access has been improved markedly. As to the secondary education, there's a room for better education access. However, what about the other theme I said? The issue is that primary and secondary education, can they really complete and graduate rather than dropping out? And the second point is how to encourage women to major in science and technology. How can you increase such science major students? There's a difference amongst the countries. Israel participants at university to study the architecture and biology and then the science. There is more women students in Israel compared to men. So there's a country difference. But depending upon the country, there's a difference, and we should take that into account. But still, those two goals should be achieved. What should be done to achieve our goals? That's what we discussed. And 10 different points were raised and summarized. First point, point 1. Especially for the developing countries, the young women forced to marry or the young pregnancy, that should be minimized and reduced. The second point is that the child labor, girl labor, which hinders her from going to school, should be reduced. So the child labor should be reduced. Third point, for the girls, the violence against young girls should be minimized, reduced, so that the reproductive organ, the incision is a serious problem which has to be stopped. The third point, FGM has to be stopped. And the third point, including the boys and men, the family males, they are biased. Attitude should be changed. We have to minimize such a biased concept among the men in the family. So how can we engage the boys and men in the discussion dialogue to minimize such a problem? The next point is that for the girls, for young girls, when they have to walk a long distance to commute to school, there's increased risk entailed. So as to the distance to commute to school should be reduced or rationalized. To achieve that, the school facilities should be established to facilitate them to go to school safely. And the next point is the safety at school. In some schools, the female teachers are not in the schools, and some people are really concerned about that. Maybe we have to also increase the number of the female faculty members, teachers. And next point, another topic in the another workshop as well, for the adolescent girl students, what is important is the safety. Like a safe sanitation, toilet, the restrooms are necessary. That's very important to have a safe restroom for girls. Another point is the female faculty teacher need to be increased in schools. And we have to have a high quality, the school female teachers need to be trained and nurtured. So that's important to train the females to become excellent teachers as well. The seventh point in our discussion is for all the children, free of charge, free school service should be given, and they should have the primary, secondary school opportunity. And in addition, for children and for girl students, maybe scholarship should be increased to be given to them. So free education should be guaranteed. And to achieve that increase of a scholarship program is very important. And the next point, for the adolescent young women, to improve the quality of education given to such young girls, textbooks and gender-based adequate education should be also given So that kind of a gender-based, adequate, and good education must be guaranteed. That was also pointed out. And the final point in our group, for the girl students to be autonomous and independent, and their spirit for autonomy should be nurtured. To nurture such a mindset amongst girls, of course, they should have a choice to choose a school that they want to go to, like science and medical and other majors should be encouraged. So they should have a chance to be exposed to scientific studies as well. So they will be encouraged to eventually major in scientific and engineering subjects as well. So there are some, all those issues were identified. How can we cope with such problems? Which is very important to identify the measures. So funding is necessary to achieve our goals. So the government, respective governments, NGOs, and other private sector companies and organizations must be involved in order to secure funding, necessary funding for these programs. So we agreed on that funding need. And finally, in our workshop, we had split opinions. What about the action plan to be proposed from our subgroup? But some participants said that let us establish International Women's University. Just some of the members strongly suggested to establish the International Women University. Thank you very much, Ambassador Shiraishi.
それでは、G
Let us proceed to G2, Women and Peace Building. Mr. Stefan Pomper, please.
Thank you very much. I'm going to begin by thanking again our host, Prime Minister Abe, Mrs. Abe, in fact, all of our Japanese hosts for really wonderful hospitality and for the vision and leadership that's manifest in this conference. Like Japan, the United States operates from the premise that no society can realize its full potential if it's not drawing fully on the talents of half its population. This is true in the political and economic spheres in times of peace, and it's also true in conflict and post-conflict situations when stakeholders are working to build the conditions for a peaceful future. And it's that latter topic, women and peace building, that was the focus of the roundtable I'll be reporting on. So our roundtable, which was wonderfully moderated by Ambassador Hiramatsu, brought together a diverse group of stakeholders, policymakers from conflict-affected states, policymakers from donor countries, representatives of humanitarian organizations, multilateral institutions, civil society, and academic institutions. Over the course of the discussion, there was a broad range of consensus. In discussing the primary areas for international focus, the discussion consistently returned to four cross-cutting themes that echo the four pillars of the framework established by UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and its successors for addressing issues relating to women, peace, and security. The first of these concerns the importance of involving women in efforts to prevent conflict by ensuring that they have a voice in political and policy discussions about security and stability issues, and ensuring that those voices are heard. And that, to some extent, ties back to some of the discussions we've been having in other places in this conference about the importance of educating girls so that they can be politically empowered. Second, we talked about the need to provide protection for women in conflict and post-conflict situations to ensure that their needs are taken into account by humanitarian responders, that they're protected from sexual and gender-based violence, and that perpetrators of that kind of violence are held to account. Third, we talked about the importance of women's participation in peace-building processes, recognizing that when peace processes involve women, particularly the local women whose lives and futures are most affected by conflict, they enjoy greater legitimacy. They're better gauged to the needs of the entire population as opposed to simply the armed combatants, and research also suggests that these arrangements are more durable. And fourth, we talked about the need to ensure that women are able to share in recovery efforts. A colleague from a humanitarian organization described how it's sometimes a struggle to ensure that women receive physical rehabilitation services in post-conflict areas where there's been weapons contamination because women can't travel to get medical services alone, or because their families don't prioritize their rehabilitation, or because of cultural constraints that prevent women from seeing male care providers. And so these are the kinds of issues we need to keep our eyes on in recovery efforts. In terms of where there's been progress on women in peace building, the group was generally of the view that there is a strong international legal and normative framework that's developed quite a bit over the last few decades. This framework includes Security Council Resolution 1325 and its successors, international treaties concerning the rights of women, and other instruments that form the international human rights architecture. Work in these overlapping areas needs to be coordinated, however, and implementation remains challenging across the board. In discussing implementation, the group focused in particular on the issue of women's participation in peace-building processes, because these processes are really where the future of a community is determined. While numbers don't tell the whole story, they do suggest a fairly bleak picture. By some counts, only roughly 8% of negotiators and 3% of mediators in peace processes conducted since the early 90s have been women, and only 25% of peace agreements reached since 2000, which was the year, incidentally, that Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted, have gender-specific provisions. Everybody agreed that that's not enough, and that it's incumbent on all governments and stakeholder organizations to show leadership by promoting the participation of women in peace-building roles and encouraging partners to do the same. So in terms of solutions, the group considered a number of recommendations, including the following. It was suggested that it's important to tell the story and raise awareness. This means working with journalists, civil society, and others to highlight the role, impact, and needs of women in the peace process. It's also important to use qualitative and quantitative data to reinforce that story. Look for ways, this is the second recommendation, look for ways to work with the government institutions that have the power to make change in the community. So another participant from a country where sexual and gender-based violence is a particular challenge spoke of how important it was to bring the military on board with efforts to counter impunity. Also, men. It was suggested that men benefit from the participation of women in peace building and can be great champions, and that they're not beyond redemption, I was pleased to hear. The third recommendation, bring a gender lens to recovery efforts. A representative from a humanitarian relief organization shared examples of creative problem solving to help women gain access to service and livelihoods in post-conflict situations. For example, helping widowed women who have unexpectedly had to assume head of household duties cut through red tape to get access to benefits and services, or start home-based small businesses so they can support their families. And in this context, there was particular emphasis on the importance of ensuring that women have access to jobs and justice and security in these recovery efforts. Another recommendation was to increase the number of women in the security sector, and this is across all the actors who may be in a particular situation, because women can have access to parts of community that men cannot reach as a result of cultural norms, and this increases the, thus increasing the participation of women in the security sector can improve a force's operational effectiveness and allow for more effective protection of the civilian population. And the presence of women in uniform also sets a positive example for women's participation and inclusion more generally. Another recommendation, very widely subscribed, was about supporting civil society. Non-governmental organizations often provide the eyes and ears of the international community in conflict areas. They can provide a platform for local women to organize and engage in peace processes, ideally not just in Track 2 processes, but also in Track 1 processes. Local organizations can be particularly important partners because they can operate in a way that are sensitive to local norms. And these organizations really need the support of the international community and donor governments in particular. Another recommendation was about engaging the private sector because they can be an essential partner in providing support for and investing in the futures of women in post-conflict communities. Another recommendation was that it's extremely important to face the extremist challenge. It was noted that we're going to need new, comprehensive tools and strategies to meet the challenges posed by extremist groups like ISIL and Boko Haram and their horrific depredations against women and girls. And finally, there was a strong recommendation about collecting lessons learned and developing new tools, including national action plans on women, peace, and security. While not a panacea, it was pointed out that a national action plan can be a vehicle for helping prioritize women, peace, and security agenda and help organize a government's work and ensure that it becomes institutionalized so that it becomes ingrained in our diplomatic, development, and military work and guides this work on a daily basis. So we all agreed that with respect to all of these recommendations. It's important to keep track of our commitments in this area and measure progress so that we achieve our ultimate goal of helping women become fully integrated into stronger, more resilient, and more prosperous post-conflict societies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Popper. And now, the group meeting G3, multi-stakeholder partnerships in international cooperation. We'd like to ask Ms. Soni Singh to give the report.
A group which looked at multi-stakeholder partnerships for international cooperation. And I think the whole theme of our group was really illustrated by the brilliant people who were part of this conversation, from ministers, MPs, First Lady Roel Ghani, Sherry Blair, heads of JICA, also representatives of the World Food Programme, CEOs, broadcasters, etc., and moderated by Yoko Hayashi. Despite the diverse backgrounds around the room, I think the multi-stakeholder partnerships we all agreed on, our recommendation is there must be an outlining of a common vision and common goal when these partnerships are entered into, whether it's private, public sector, civil society, broadcast media. We felt the need for a common vision and goal was very, very important at the outset of any project. As part of this common vision, our group would recommend the mainstreaming of gender issues. We feel that women's issues should not be discussed in a box by women. And we really applaud this conference and the dynamic leadership of Prime Minister Abe and Mrs. Abe in putting this as part of a political agenda. This is not just about talk or something that sounds good. Japan is actually leading the way in this, and we feel we would urge Prime Minister Abe that in Japan's leadership of G7, that this is really part of the agenda. And not just gender issues, but also issues like health and education, which have too long been ignored in many developing countries as soft issues, but we feel the time has come to accept these as issues that matter to the global good. So not just G7, we hope at the G20 as well, all these issues will come up. We looked also, our group focused on how cooperation should not just be from government to government, but people to people across borders. We had a very interesting instance where Mr. Takahara of Unicharm talked of how his company, once a construction company, now makes sanitary napkins in Saudi Arabia. So we have this wonderful example of Saudi women making sanitary napkins and having to actually converse with Japanese engineers in video conference because of the strict rules. But the world is changing, and who knows what this small example may do. So we would encourage really small initiatives like this, which can mean so much symbolically. We also looked at the disruptive power of technology, and technology, more than anything else, is, we feel, gender neutral, and we looked especially at mobile technology. India, for instance, has more mobile phones than toilets, so if you look at how you can use mobile phones, you can actually transform generations to come, and we've seen in India and other countries, another colleague talked of M-Pesa in Africa, where mobile banking services can be used by the poorest of the poor and by women especially. Sherry Blair talked also from a foundation, and WFP of how women can make sure they have access to their rights through a mobile phone sitting in their homes. Also aid, and that's an important, slightly controversial topic Roel Ghani, the First Lady, raised. What happens when the aid organizations go home? How do we actually empower countries which are recipients of this aid to be able to continue this process? Who also is the teacher? Often a country which is seen as a recipient or the recipient of charity is actually the country which knows much more about solutions that are relevant to itself. So perhaps re-looking at who is the donor and who is the recipient, and much more a level playing field where both learn from each other, and we look also at sustainable solutions. Our group also looks forward to the new Sustainable Development Goals to be set by the UN just a month from now. We feel, as the WFP representative put it, this will be a new compass for our global community, a moral compass which I hope we will all adhere to and see the changes in the years to come. And finally, we feel this is a perfect opportunity for us all to work together as global citizens in a world where gender equality is a reality, not a buzzword, where we hope women will not just shine, but in some instances outshine some of our fellow citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have heard the global issues, and then we have heard the reports from the six subgroups. And their time for reporting so short, but they were so enthusiastic and they covered a broad range of subjects. We were quite impressed by their reports. Now, A new initiative this year, that is 6 of course, special sessions were conducted. We could not hear from all the 6 special sessions, but on behalf, we hear the report from youth table participants. The speakers are Gathan, our hero, and then Ms. Muna Abu Mizar. They represent Jordan and Palestine participating in this WAW 2015. They are university students. So we'd like to hear the reports from those two university students representing youth table.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy and glad to be here today and to participate as the voice of youth and to share what we had discussed together as a youth with you. My name is Muna Abu Mizar. I'm from Palestine, and I'm a 4th-year pharmacy student. My colleague is Ghassan Al-Hilou. He's from Jordan, and he's also a 2nd-year business student. In this closing session, we would like to share with you some perspective coming from youth from this afternoon sessions on youth, from our exchanges with peers or from other countries, and from our own troubled region of the Middle East. You may know from your own experience that adolescents and youth have tons of energy and endless optimism and determination. We want to make difference on issues that matter to us, and already many of us are already doing this, as they inspired us to be here today and share this with you. On the behalf of what we were discussing, there is a lot of barriers that are standing against the youth to participate in the community and to have the future that they're looking for, as addressing issues for youth like criminalities and smoking and reproductive issues, addressing the impact of natural disasters such as those have happened in Nepal and here in Japan, contributing to promoting peace and social cohesion as Ghassan and I are doing in our countries. When channeled positively, we can have a significant impact and be influenced on our peers, on those younger than us, as well as who's older than us, an older generation. However, as youth, we face a variety of challenges in realizing our potential to contribute positively towards our community and countries on which we would like your support. Youth often lack information and knowledge of what's out there, and don't always have the tools to help us access information. This is especially the case in more rural and marginalized communities. Also, we have economic and gender barriers exist that often prevent youth from pursuing higher education and getting a university degree to further enhance their knowledge and skills. We have also high unemployment, and nepotism in our countries. It means that even when youth are qualified and really have good skills, they don't get the opportunity to participate and prove themselves in the community. Certain traditional or cultural norms also serve as obstacles, especially for women in particular societies with significant gender inequality. So before I turn you to my colleague Ghassan, I just want to say I'm really happy to be here today, and participating here made me feel that I can make an action as everyone doing, and when everyone make an action, we can serve and build our community. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank my colleague, Muna, for an inspiring talk, and I would like to thank my colleague panelists on what they have shared earlier. As we have our results ready after the session that you have just finished, those are the youth requirements that they are requesting from your cooperation. As youth, we want equal education, and also we want information. We want to access information for those who don't have the ability to do so. We want exposure to our opportunities that enable us to build important life skills and critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. We want to be engaged in political processes, to have our voice count through voting, participation in youth parliaments, and running for elections. And yesterday, during the virtual call, there was a colleague who shared an astonishing example that a girl from Albania has recently joined the parliament and was elected, whose age is 21. Yeah. And we've got this expression as well. All right. We want to build networks that will help us to connect with one another in order to gain experience from other people's culture and experiences. Our messages to you as the following. No one knows the issues for youth better than youth themselves. We would like to appreciate your cooperation, but all we need is a little push to reach our goal. We want to be the change we seek in our communities and among the region, and we can be the change. We want to participate in decision making. Also, we are full of idealism and energy and optimism, but we are also about the action. Don't discount the impact we can have. We can set our minds and we can get our energy to reach our particular goals. We ask you to contribute and share information and helping us to create options for ourselves, so that we can also have choices that are available to others, and we can take the action. Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much, both of you. And there are 5 special sessions other than youth table, and I would like to thank them very much for their contribution. We have listened to various reports at WAW. We come here to discuss and come up with recommendations in Japan and the regions across the national boundaries, regional boundaries. We have to place them into practice and action, and that's the raison d'etre of WAW. We are going to compile WAW to do 2015. We have listened to the reports from the roundtable sessions, your views, your recommendations will be compiled by the Secretariat within a week or so in the form of WAW to do 2015. We have listened to reports so far. If there are any other points not raised during this closing session, please contact us. We would appreciate it very much. At the very outset of today, Foreign Minister Mr. Kishida reported these recommendations and proposals are to be placed into actions, specific actions by Japan, as we did for what WAW to do 2014. I do hope each nation, each region should take these ideas back home, involving government, business corporations, civil organizations, so that the world in which women can engage effectively will expand. This year, the theme is WAW for all. And a new attempt was Youth Table, from which we got various ideas for better future. As Prime Minister Abe said at the very outset, the changes are taking place here in Japan. In the field of consciousness or perception, one example is that this year, among those new recruits to business corporation this year, almost half of the women responded that someday they would like to hold a managerial positions. So there is a signs of change in Japan. We need to keep this momentum. Each and every one of us has to take actions. Actions today will create the world tomorrow. For the next 12 months, Let us strive forward. Let's roll up our sleeves and put them into action so that we can create a society in which both men and women can shine. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the discussants, reporters, participants, and the supporters of this symposium. And we have Shine Weeks as a parallel session. Those who designed and participate in the Shine Weeks and other volunteers, so many people cooperated to make this WAW 2015 into realizations. I would like to thank all of them. Next year, WAW to do 2016. Well, I do hope that many more will come next year. And this concludes my remarks. Thank you very much for your participation today.